We'll get ready.
Go right ahead. Don't wait for me.
Okay, before we begin our regular program tonight, I want to introduce Deb White, who has an announcement.
Thanks. I told Bill I didn't need any announcement. For those of you that were here earlier, you already know probably what the announcement is. It's somebody's birthday today, and the birthday belongs to the incorporation of the town of Hammonton. March 5th, 160 years ago, this town was incorporated. So I've made some birthday cakes. I told a few people I was going to make paper hats, but I thought that maybe was a bit much. But we are going to sing happy birthday because the town deserves happy birthday. And then we'll just pass around some birthday cakes, okay? So if everybody can join me. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Hammonton. Happy birthday to us. Yay. Thank you.
Any more?
Thank you, Deb. Well, great to see such a great crowd again tonight, and to joining us. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Our speaker tonight, I have known 3 generations of the family, and I have to tell you that our speaker's grandfather was nicknamed Mohawk. So you may want to know how he ever got that name. And I asked him one time, and he gave me the story. And he said that when he was younger, and he played on the Hammonton baseball team. And back in those days, that there was a baseball team in Folsom, Winslow, Blue Anchor, they're all over the place. And apparently that he was a feisty young man, and I heard that the team heard that there were some people out to get him from the other team. So they changed his name to Mohawk. And so Mohawk name has lived throughout the generations. So it wasn't something that you would say when you would see Joe's father, Anthony. You wouldn't say Anthony, but if you were talking about another blueberry grower, you always say, well, you mean the Mohawks. And so anyway, so enough of the Hammonton folklore. Our speaker tonight is a graduate of Hammonton High, a graduate of Rowan College with a master's in writing. He has written for a long time in the Hammonton Gazette. He's a published author, co-host today of a podcast, and caretaker of the Oak Grove Cemetery. And so with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Joe Mohawk. No, I won't say. It was some folklore I wanted to share. Yeah, so Joe Berenato.
Thank you, Bill, and I hope I live up to my hype. As Bill said, I'm Joe Berenato. Tonight's presentation was originally going to be about the history of the cemeteries in Hammonton, but when we realized that it would fall on the 160th anniversary of the town's incorporation, I decided to have a little bit of fun with it. So I hope you enjoy, and again, I hope I live up to my hype. We present Hammonton, founders and first families. Where are they now? In your cemetery. Though the story of Hammonton begins with the Lenni Lenape, we don't have that kind of time. So our story begins with William Coffin, born February 10th, 1775. Coffin first came to the area to run a sawmill on a 644-acre tract of land owned by John Coates, and then subsequently purchased the mill and the entire tract in 1814. Upon his death in November of 1844, the tract, the house, the mill, everything on it was left equally to his sons, Edward Winslow Coffin, after whom Winslow Township is named, and John Hammond Coffin, up there, after whom Hammonton was named. and who, incidentally, if he were still alive, would turn 210 years old tomorrow. So, in 1850, John bought out Edward's share, and the town continued to grow, especially with the arrival of the railroad in 1854. Near the coffin mill was a Methodist church, and in its yard was Old Hammonton Cemetery. There were about 20 known graves in total, with the earliest being from 1841 and the latest from 1855. The last readable names were Abigail Daniel, Charles Daniel, Laura Matilda Daniel, Lucretia Southard, Joseph Burney, Robert Corson, Eli Corson, and simply H.S. Over time, the markers were either stolen or fell apart. The cemetery was largely forgotten until the construction of Plymouth Place apartments in the late 1990s, when it was rediscovered. And now the area is marked by a wrought iron fence, and I wouldn't even know who to contact, but I, for one, would be in favor of a plaque of some sort being there with the names that we could find. But that's me. Though their roots and their lives were in Hammonton, the entire Coffin family, including William Coffin's son-in-law, U.S. Representative Andrew Hay, they're buried in Colestown Cemetery, which is now in Cherry Hill. According to his obituary, John Hammond Coffin engaged in real estate transactions for a number of years in Philadelphia, after which he helped lawyer Charles K. Landis open up and settle Vineland. John Coffin died in 1906. And then enter Landis and Burns into the story of Hammonton. In 1856, while both in Philadelphia, Landis and Richard Burns formed a partnership, and shortly thereafter started buying up large swaths of land in and around Hammonton. They began advertising parcels for sale in newspapers throughout New England, touting Hammonton as picturesque, good for the health, ideal for crops of all varieties. Their partnership lasted several years and attracted hundreds of new residents to Hammonton from across the country before ideological differences brought that relationship to a close in 1861. Landis went on to found Vineland and later Sea Isle City, both of which feature a Landis Avenue as their main drag, a feature which is noticeably absent from Hammonton, emblematic of that aforementioned split. Landis died in 1900 and was buried in the family plot in Vineland Siloam Cemetery, which opened in 1864 on ground that Landis donated to the town. By 1860, the new residents of Hammonton recognized the need for a burial ground. Rural cemeteries with a landscaped park-like setting were slowly replacing churchyards. So to that end, on February 15th of 1860, William Elvins, A.J. Cruikshank, H.L. Ferris, A.M. Montgomery, George Henry, Charles Putnam, and Merrill Parkhurst, and others, met at Elvins Hall and formed the Oak Grove Cemetery Association, which was incorporated on February 22nd of that year. On June 4th, the association bought a 10-acre parcel of land on what is now the corner of the White Horse Pike and Old Forks Road for the sum of $1 from Charles Landis's parents, Michael and Mary. Incidentally, since then, we have had a Parkhurst on the board since 1860. 5 years later, Hammonton's third cemetery was formed, also a rural cemetery, on land between First and Shoe Roads. Though burials may have taken place on the land that eventually became Greenmount Cemetery as early as the 1840s, the Greenmount Cemetery Association itself wasn't actually formed until July 8, 1865. On that day, E.T. McKean, Russell Ellis, Hiram Crowell, Jerry Valentine, Cyrus J. Fay, and others met at Fay's store to officially incorporate. In 1955, St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church, then the only Catholic church in Hammonton, made it known that it intended to form a Catholic cemetery. So, Greenmount donated 10.5 acres of their unimproved land to the parish. That, along with other land along First and Shoe Roads, became the Holy Sepulchre and I've never been able to pronounce that right, Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. Father Nick Rinaldi, who many of us remember with fondness, was pastor of the parish when the cemetery opened. As the years have progressed, all three of Hammonton's active cemeteries have continued to grow and expand with the town's increasing population. However, because of its relative youth, the new kid on the block, Holy Sepulchre, known in the industry as Holy Sep, or less formally around town as the Catholic Cemetery, it's too new to be home to any of Hammonton's founders or first families, so let's circle back to them, what they did, and where they are today. My papers are out of order. Good heavens. There we go. Okay. In 1861, a committee was formed to start the process of defining and incorporating the town of Hammonton. Jerry Valentine and William Elvins were part of that committee, and notice was first given on November 12th of that year. On March 5th of 1866, 160 years ago today, and one day before John Hammond Coffin's 50th birthday, the town was officially incorporated. 3 weeks later, the first meeting of the Board of Council was held at Elvins Hall, attended by Valentine, Peter Tilton, John Bryant, Thomas Weatherby, Jesse Thomas, and Isaiah Potter. Valentine was the temporary chairman, replaced after several rounds of voting by Weatherby as the elected chair of the council. That system of leadership held for right around 4 decades until council decided that the leader should be elected by the electorate, by the voters. So in 1908, Marcellus L. Jackson became Hammonton's first elected mayor, but more on him in a little bit. At the time of the town's incorporation, there were just over 1,400 people living within its borders, roughly a tenth of the town's current population today. Some of their names still live on, either through descendants, through stories, or through street names. So let's take a look at some of the families who were here 160 years ago. Let's begin with Richard Burns. For his part, after his split with Landis, Burns stayed in Hammonton and became very active in its activities. In 1877, he was appointed as a lay judge for the Court of Common Pleas in Atlantic County, a position which he held for 3 terms. When the Hammonton Building and Loan Association was formed in 1871, he became its president. 16 years later, he helped organize the People's Bank, also serving as its president, and he held both positions until his death in 1909. He is buried with his first wife, Fanny, in Greenmount Cemetery. Now, there were many pioneering families in the early days, so here are a few of who I think are the more interesting ones, presented mostly in alphabetical order so as to avoid favoritism. And just as a note, my family didn't get here in 1890, so they're not on here. I don't believe there were any Italian families in 1866, so they're all out. And if you were here before then and I left your family out, I apologize. Give me one moment. Okay. Let us begin with the Adams family. No, not that one. In 1861, James Capon Adams, his wife Augusta, and their children moved from New England and bought a farm on Oak Road. Adams was the 4th cousin twice removed to President John Adams, and 5th cousin once removed to John Quincy Adams. And his brother, John Boyden Adams, was also quite famous in his own right. He went out west, adopted James's name, and became known the world over as Grizzly Adams. So yes, that's Grizzly Adams' brother. James lived out his days on Oak Road until his death in 1897, and Augusta followed in 1900. Their children all stayed in the area. One son, Edwin, served on the Board of Education for 20 years and was so beloved and influential that for his funeral, local school children were given a half day so that they could attend it. Another son, Alvin, originated a variety of grape that became wildly popular for wines and jellies, and his daughter, Almeda, married Rene Persico, son of Emmanuel Persico, one of the founders of the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And they are all, including the Persicos, in Oak Grove Cemetery. Captain William M. Burgess, his wife Asenath, and their 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls, moved to Hammonton from Maine in 1862 and settled on the land which he cleared and farmed on what is now Walker Road. One of their daughters, Mary, unfortunately died at the age of 24 in 1873. Another, Lavinia, married Stephen Thomas in 1866, but died at the age of 33 in 1880. Adeline married in 1873, but more on her in just a moment. Asenath joined her daughters at the age of 69 in 1886, and the captain reunited with them at Oak Grove Cemetery in 1895. Now, back to Addie. As I said, in 1873, Adeline Addie Burgess did marry to one Marcellus L. Jackson, who would later go on to be Hammonton's mayor. They had 2 children together, one of whom died young. Addie joined her son and her sisters in 1881. All of them are in the Burgess plot at Oak Grove Cemetery. And as for Marcellus Jackson, very dapper looking man. While not a day oneer, he married in, so I'm going to count it. He moved here from Maine in 1868, which I know doesn't count, but still, he married in. In the 1870s, he opened Jackson's Meat Market. He served as town clerk and was elected to the board of chosen freeholders and later to state assembly. He became Hammonton's postmaster in 1899, a position which he held until he began his term as mayor. After Addie's death in 1881, Jackson married Margaret King, and the couple had 2 more boys, Ernest and Edwin. Marcellus died in 1921, Margaret followed in 1933, and both of them are in Greenmount Cemetery. The Elvins family left an indelible mark on the town. The father, Andrew, emigrated from England and landed in Philadelphia before moving the entire family to Hammonton in 1858, where he opened up the family's general store on the corner of what is now the White Horse Pike and Bellevue Avenue. It became this epicenter of town activity. Elvins Hall in the upstairs of the building served many functions, including as a meeting hall, a social hall, and a place of worship for many congregations before churches had been built. When son William, who worked with Jerry Valentine on the incorporation efforts and was one of the founders of Oak Grove, when he was appointed postmaster, that building also served as the town's post office. Upon incorporation, George Elvins was the town's first tax collector and treasurer, and William became the overseer of roads. In 1869, George, in turn, became postmaster before becoming Hammonton's first representative to the state assembly in 1881. So, Anthony, you are in a long line of good company here. Their brother, Thomas, also served in the assembly, and he was also mayor for 3 different terms. Independent Volunteer Fire Company, their hall is named after another Thomas Elvins who died during a fire call, and there is a road named after the entire family. Most of the original Elvins family is buried across several lots in, you guessed it, Oak Grove. It is impossible to talk about the history of Hammonton and not include the Parkhurst family. Pascal Parkhurst and his wife Eliza left Milford, Massachusetts sometime in the 1840s with their 2 children, Susan and Merrill. They stayed for a brief time in Ohio, where Susan unfortunately died and a 3rd child, Lumen, was born, before making their way to Hammonton around 1857. Upon arrival, they pitched a tent where I believe Hammonton Bottling was, while they were waiting for their home on Main Road, now the White Horse Pike, to be completed. Pascal took up farming and actually served as the 2nd president of town council from 1867 to 1869. Eliza died in 1868 and Pascal joined her in 1871. Both are in Oak Grove on what is affectionately known as Parkhurst Hill. Side note, while there were earlier burials at the cemetery, the first deed issued from the association in 1869 was to Pascal Parkhurst. Lumen went off to fight in the war between the states. He was enrolled in the 24th New Jersey Volunteer Infantry on September 1st, 1862, and was mustered in as a private in Company 1 on September 16th of that year. He served through the December 1862 Fredericksburg campaign and the May 1863 Chancellorsburg campaign, and was honorably mustered out of federal service on June 29th, 1863. He then rejoined the Union war effort, being commissioned as a 1st lieutenant in Company B, 43rd United States Colored Troops. Lumen had an illustrious career in town and was well respected, serving at one time as the director of the nation's first Fruit Growers Association, and for many years served on the board of chosen freeholders, all of whom attended his funeral when he passed. He had 3 sons, Charles, George, and William H. Sr., whose grandson is sitting right there. All of them and most of their descendants are on Parkhurst Hill. While Lumen went off to war, Merrill stayed home and helped run the farm. Merrill married Ellen McKay, and together they had 1 child, Leighton. Merrill was among the first peach growers in Hammonton, and besides being the shipping agent of the aforementioned Fruit Growers Union, Merrill was also chairman of the county executive committee. Both he and Ellen died in 1892. Merrill and Ellen are the only members of the Parkhurst family at Oak Grove who aren't buried on Parkhurst Hill. Instead, they're buried with Leighton's first wife, Olive. Olive was a member of the Beach family, which arrived in Hammonton in the early 1860s. Her father, Harvey, served in the Civil War. His first wife, Flora, with whom he had 1 daughter, died in 1866. Harvey married Sarah Derringer in 1868, and they had Willis in 1869 and Olive in 1872. Harvey died in 1904 and is buried in between both of his wives. I don't know if I would have done that, but they did things differently back then. Willis's daughter Millie died in 1892, and the plot where Olive and her in-laws are buried is right behind the plot where Millie is buried. Now, Millie is the only one marked. Willis, his wife Amanda, and their daughter Bertha are all unmarked. And if the name Willis Beach sounds familiar to any local history buffs, it's because he was convicted in 1927 in the murder of Dr. William Liliendahl, a trial that shocked the nation, but that's a story for another time. So, next on our roster is the Reverend William Passmore, who arrived in 1859 and owned a large parcel of land running from Egg Harbor Road to First Road and at least from Bellevue Avenue to Line Street and perhaps further in either direction. He donated a parcel on the corner of Bellevue and Washington Street for the construction of the First Methodist Church in New Hammonton, and also leased land so that the railroad could run through town. He was also a crackpot. Passmore published not 1, but 2 novella-length screeds decrying what he felt that were injustices that befell him. The first, the rascalities of high railroad officials and how to check and to correct them, published in 1889 and clocking in at just under 100 pages, stemmed from a misunderstanding with a train conductor. As a condition of the easement on his land for the train to come through, Passmore and his family were supposed to get free passes for life. 1 year, the train office was late in sending out the passes, and boom, the first manifesto. The second, published in 1892, was The Hammonton Ring and How It Works, the case of William Passmore against the town of Hammonton. Comparing town officials to the corrupt members of New York's Tammany Hall, Passmore launches into a 126-page diatribe against anyone in charge at the time, purporting that the town stole his land and so forth. In truth, I haven't read the whole thing because it's crazy, but I will say this. Throughout the entire pamphlet, and I use that term loosely, there is only 1 person about whom he had anything nice to say, noting that he was a friend and true gentleman. And that person was Lumen Parkhurst. So that man must have been some kind of saint. Passmore is buried in Oak Grove with his wife Elizabeth and their daughter Mary. Interesting aside about Mary. She was all set to marry James Watkiss, who was partners in a florist business with George Nicholson, son of the famous painter. Seemingly out of nowhere, the good Reverend withdrew his blessing, saying that they would get married over his dead body, which they more or less did. Passmore died on January 9th, 1896, and Mary and James married on February 2nd, less than a month later. Now, Mary died in 1931 and was buried with her parents. James died on February 3rd, 1945, and instead of being buried with his wife of 25 years, he was buried in a lot that he bought with Nicholson, with whom he also lived, and who was buried next to him later that year, so who knows? Moving on. The Tilton family is a very old one in Atlantic County and factors into much of its history, and Hammonton is no exception. Peter Steelman Tilton, his wife Mariette, and their son Wilbur came to Hammonton in 1864 when they bought an unfinished 3-story store on the corner of Egg Harbor Road and Bellevue Avenue. The Tilton store, located right near the Camden and Atlantic Railroad, became a vital part of the town for decades thereafter, becoming P.S. Tilton and Son when Wilbur joined in 1878. After Mariette died in 1871, Peter married Mary Jane, anybody know how to pronounce that? Dupuy? Okay, Dupuy. Thank you all, because I can recognize words, but pronunciation. Anyway, Mary Jane Dupuy, and they had one daughter, Mariette, named after Peter's first wife, but spelled differently. In addition to the store, Peter Tilton was collector and treasurer for the town from 1876 to 1879 and was treasurer of the Hammonton Cranberry and Improvement Company. He died on March 28, 1895. Mary Jane joined him in 1928, and they are buried in the Tilton Dupuy lot in Greenmount Cemetery. Now, for his part, Wilbur left the store in 1887 to become the cashier at People's Bank, a position he held for the rest of his life. He was also a member of the Board of Education from 1902 to 1909, serving as its vice president, for a number of years. He died in 1931, where he joined his wife Eugenia, who passed in 1920. They're also in Greenmount, but on a different lot. Of note, Wilbur's middle daughter, Irma, a gifted painter who painted that and many, many others, was actually one of the signers of the Certificate of Incorporation for the Historical Society of Hammonton, filed 61 years ago yesterday. Next up, Jerry Valentine, whose name has come up quite a bit tonight. Valentine was born in Maine in 1911, moved to Worcester, Mass. As a boy, and came to Hammonton with his wife Sally sometime around 1860 or 1861, depending on which account you read. As previously mentioned, he helped lead efforts to incorporate the town, was one of the signers of the town's charter, served as interim president of the first council when it was organized, and later served 3 terms as its president. Valentine was an undertaker by trade, and for many years was the only undertaker in the town of Hammonton. And that's where my beef with him comes in. You may recall from earlier that Jerry Valentine was one of the founders of Greenmount Cemetery, and in fact, served as its first secretary. Today, he would not be able to do this. Since 1971, anyone involved with the management or operations of a cemetery are prohibited from engaging directly or indirectly in the conduct of any funeral home or in the business or profession of mortuary science. This is to ensure that individuals don't see any financial benefit from providing preferential treatment to a cemetery in which they have a vested interest. I'm not saying that's why that place became so popular, but now, this wasn't the case in the 1860s, as cemeteries weren't regulated at all, but as an undertaker on a cemetery board, that would not fly today. Jerry moved into Greenmount, shock, in March of 1900, and Sally joined him in 1903. As an aside, Jerry and Sally often took in boarders. One of them, who lived with them at the time of the census in 1880, is one of my favorite obscure figures from the town of Hammonton, Miss Adeline Woodburn. Adeline and her brother Josiah came to Hammonton from Shrewsbury, Massachusetts sometime around 1858. Little is known about Josiah except that his wife Olive died in 1851, and she's buried in Park Avenue Cemetery in Holden, Massachusetts. Josiah, a builder who worked on the home once occupied by Dr. James Peebles, who came to town too late for this presentation. He died in March of 1863 at the age of 52 and was buried at Oak Grove. Now, Miss Adeline, one of the earliest born residents at Oak Grove, June 9th, 1799 to be precise, continued on for almost 2 decades. She died at the age of 81 in 1881 at the home of William Brown on Egg Harbor Road, but the instructions she left for her funeral were so specific, I feel like we probably would have gotten along, she and I. According to her obituary, and I quote, "By special request of the deceased, no person will be, quote, invited to attend the funeral because of his ability as a public speaker. For the same reason, the coffin will not be opened. The remains will be interred previous to the public services." Now, I don't know who that sentiment was directed towards, though I'm certain she had someone specific in mind in a very passive-aggressive obituary. But either way, Miss Adeline certainly got the last word. Now, these were, of course, just a smattering of the pioneers who set Hammonton on the path to become the town where we all love to work, live, and play. One of the most important aspects, and my favorite aspect of my job at the cemetery, is to learn all I can about the residents, not only there, but in each cemetery in town, because they and we are all interconnected. We're all stories in the end, and it's important that we continue to tell them. The people in tonight's presentation left such a mark that we're still talking about them 160 years later. I can only hope that people 160 years from now will remember us and tell our stories with such fondness. Thank you. I did. These are my sources in case anybody's interested.
Joe, how big is the cemetery now? It started 10 acres, right? How big is it today?
After we picked up the land from the town with the rerouting of Old Forks, we're probably about 13 or 14 acres. I have no idea how big Greenmount is, but I put them probably at about 30, give or take, I would think.
Okay.
Yes?
Does the cemetery own that abandoned house next door to it?
Oak Grove?
Yes.
No, that is actually smack in the center of 2 parcels of land that is still owned by the estate of the Paulo Castro family, while the DEP continues remediation efforts to clean up a 50,000-gallon oil spill from the late 70s, early 80s. That being said, if anybody has just a metric ton of money would like to pick up the parcel and leave it to the cemetery, we'd appreciate that. Anybody else?
Joe, are there still plots available?
In every cemetery, yes.
Every cemetery?
Yes. Well, not old Hammonton Cemetery, but yes, we are still active. Greenmount is still active. We continue to grow and expand, and yes, there are many plots available. Anybody else?
Joe, you
Yes.
mentioned the Adams family in the first, so Joe Grove Adams. And so their daughter was Ruth Persico, who married Bill DeMayo of the Middle Road DeMayo.
Yes.
Blueberry Tourism. Yeah, I don't think it's widely known that, but.
Yeah, so, and then that whole line of the DeMayo, starting with him, they can trace their line back to the Persico family, and they may not even realize that they are related to 2 presidents at least. So, yeah. There and then there. Dave.
Thank you, Joe. I think I can speak for all of us, we can say, we're very impressed with all your research and knowledge. It was great.
Thank you.
But I do have a question.
Oh, boy. For those of you who don't know, Dave was actually my advisor when I taught at Atlantic Cape, so here we go.
One of the finest teachers that I've ever witnessed.
I paid him to say that.
And you can see that here tonight, one of the best presenters. In any case, ever since I came to the town about 30 years ago, I've wondered, if you look at Greenmount Cemetery and the Catholic Cemetery, there's a fence between them.
Mhm.
Now, is this because they're afraid the one side will convert the other side? Why is there a fence between those two
Didn't want
cemeteries?
anybody to escape, Dave.
I guess so the caretaker knows where to stop mowing.
I thought it was a pure conversion.
Could be, who knows? Deb?
Just wanted everyone to know the Historic Society now has a dedicated spot in the museum with a computer that is loaded with Ancestry.com that will be available for anyone who would like to come in and learn their ancestry.
Oh, that's cool.
Thanks to a grant that Eileen helped us get, and so please take advantage of it.
Yeah, just need to make an appointment, because we're not always there.
And how does someone make that appointment?
Email. Yeah, email or call.
Okay, on the website?
We're about to get, hopefully, one of our volunteers took many courses in genealogy, and he's a younger fellow, unlike us, and so hopefully he's going to help us and help people in the community navigate that.
Oh,
Excellent. Any other questions?
There's one in the back.
Yes.
Were a lot of people who came to Hammonton early, were they from Massachusetts? You mentioned Massachusetts several times.
Maine.
Yeah, a great deal were from Massachusetts, some were from Maine, some were from New York. Some came from Ohio, but started off in New England. Burns and Landis, they really had a concentrated advertising campaign in the New York Times and major newspapers all up and down New England, trying to draw down as many people as humanly possible. So I would say most of the settlers at that time were from New York through Maine, mostly Massachusetts. Yes?
One wonders how much of an impact on getting people to come to Hammonton, the plan of 1856 that was presented, restored and presented yesterday in Town Hall, had an impact on the people coming here.
Oh, I'm sure that it did. A, it was gorgeous, and B, I mean, the lots of land were what, $5 to $25, which is like pocket change now, but even in the 1860s, that wasn't an exorbitant, it wasn't a lot of money. So, yes.
Another fact that people may not know, the plan of Hammonton, the one that has been restored, came from Vineland. It was the lady who ran Vineland several years ago called up and said, we think this belongs to you. And we'd like to, we don't know, but we'd like to kind of conjecture that since Mr. Landis landed up in Vineland, perhaps there's some connection between that particular document and Mr. Landis.
Oh, I would wager all the money in my pocket against all the money in yours that there is, 100%. I mean, that was the plan that was, I think, conjectured by Burns and Landis.
This one, we were wondering if it was actually his, one that he touched.
Oh, no, I would still wager all that. I would bet money on that, that it was probably his from his collection. I would guess.
He don't, his
We
art,
have handouts there of the plan, right here.
Oh, nifty.
So people can take the handouts and see what's going on.
Mr. Landis also built, the museum in Vineland, and it was the first museum in the state of New Jersey that was built specifically as a museum. Gorgeous museum if you've never been there.
It is. If you ever have the opportunity to visit the Vineland Antiquarian and Historical Society, it's gorgeous. Greg, you've had your hand up.
yeah, most everything's been said. But yes, he did establish that first historical museum in New Jersey, and all his artifacts were donated in the early 1900s.
Seems a
to the
little
museum.
self-serving, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna start this city, and I'm gonna start a museum dedicated to the history of this city that I started.
He was big on that.
He was big on that. Yeah, he was also arrested for murder one time. Anybody know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he got off of temporary insanity, but a newspaper editor, so, I guess he didn't like journalists, insulted his wife, and Landis went up and shot him. Yeah, fun guy. Bill?
Joe, in some of the messages that were sent to New England, talking mostly about the health benefits of
Sewer
Hammonton.
water.
But one of them was that you could grow strawberries as big as a silver dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Thus the Parkers were in agriculture from then until now.
think I saw, yes.
When I was working during the pandemic in the cemetery, and I used to stop at all the different cemetery tombstones, there were a lot of tombstones that had captain on them. And I couldn't decide if it was captain like military or captain of ships.
So far as I know, the only one that says captain that was captain of military was Jason St. John. I know Captain William Burgess was a sea captain. There's a Captain Jameson with us who was also a sea captain.
But I did see anchors a lot. So
Yeah,
yes.
I believe C.T. Bickner was also a sea captain, back when it was actually a profession.
Right.
But most of them, insofar as we've been able to determine thus far, were sea captains, yes, which is still cool. Yeah. Yes,
So my maternal great-great-grandfather was a captain, Captain William Henry Hubbard,
yes.
from the British naval officer. I always wanted to put a flag of the English flag there, but I never had the nerve.
Go ahead. Who's gonna say anything now? Do it.
Anybody else? All right. Well, then, I'm going to adjourn the public comment portion of the close. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much.